technology in order, but thanks to Molly. We will be recording tonight's meeting, so that will make it available to folks who weren't able to be here with us tonight. So just by way of explanation, for some of you who may have wondered why this meeting wasn't virtual, there is an overload associated with making it virtual, and it requires a couple of sets of hands, and particularly someone who knows what they're doing. And we weren't sure that Molly was going to be with us tonight, so we didn't advertise the meeting as virtual, but we will be recording it. So I'm glad that you're all here. I hope you discovered the cider and cookies and tea in the back. If not, help yourself. There's also a table of handouts back there. So thanks for coming out. It looks like the weather's going to hold off for a few more hours tonight. I'm Julie O'Leary, and I'm the president of the McCabe chapter of the Izaak Walton League. So I'm glad to see you all here, and we have a presentation that I hope you'll enjoy. I wish we weren't looking at snow out the window still. But we're going to be hearing about pollinators, specifically native bees, and about one of the organizations here in town that helps people convert their lawns and yards to more pollinator-friendly plants. Spring is coming, even if we have to endure at least one more storm and maybe breaking that record to get there. So a couple of announcements before we get started here. One, I know you are all aware that this is Earth Week and that Earth Day is coming up on Saturday. And I just wanted to mention a couple of events that I know are happening. One is the Farmers Market has an Earth Day event on Saturday from 10 to 3. That's indoors. I think by Saturday, whatever storm is coming at us will have ended. So hopefully they'll have nice weather for that. There's also a Lincoln Park Earth Day cleanup Saturday if you're in that end of town or you want to participate in that. That starts at 9 a.m. at Ursa Minor. I know there are many other activities happening, but those are a couple that I was aware of. Another one, Cathy?
A big one at Clyde Iron on Saturday, Eco Fest.
Okay.
It's being sponsored by Equilibrium 3, and that runs from 11 till 3, and it's free. Lots of vendors, lots of information.
Okay, you know, that wasn't on their website because I knew they were doing something and I specifically went there looking for it. So thanks for sharing that. And then an event next week that we wanted to make people aware of, and I've got a handout here that I'll pass around about it. So Water Legacy is offering a virtual program on citizen science sampling for sulfate in Minnesota, why it matters and how to get involved if you're interested. And that's going to be Tuesday at 5 p.m. I attempted to print out their flyer and I got some of it, but not all of it. If you get Rich's emails, he included this in his email. So this is a free event, but you do need to register. Some of the IKES members did participate in a earlier presentation about sulfate and some of what might be happening with this program, and it sounds like it should be a really good talk. And for those who might want to get involved in monitoring or hearing more about that work, that's coming up. So I'll pass that around. Also want to remind the IKES to renew your membership, and if you're not a member, please join us. You can do that online. We are on a calendar year basis, not a meeting year. We start meeting in September and end in June, and we don't particularly align our membership with that year. You need to join at the beginning of the year. Hi, come on in and feel free to pull these chairs to the back if you're too uncomfortable being that close up front.
I can see better if I'm up front.
All right. So you can renew online again if you're on Rich's email list. He sent reminders out. I know Martha sent reminders out, and we encourage all of our current members to renew. And if you're not a member, please consider joining us. It's our anniversary this year. The Ikes are 100 years old. We're gonna be doing some fun stuff in September to celebrate that during the month. It's actually our anniversary, so we'd love to have you participate. So I would, with that, I think, like to just introduce our program. We're a little late getting started, and I know they have a lot to share with us. So we have two presenters tonight on this topic, and are really fortunate to have them. Sarah Foltz Jordan is a senior pollinator conservation biologist with the Xerxes Society and leads the organization's pollinator conservation efforts in the Great Lakes region. So Sarah works closely with farmers, state agencies, local governments, and community members to create habitats to reduce pesticides and improve the lives of pollinators. So she's going to talk with us about some of the major groups of native bees, their habitat needs, and the steps that each of us can take in our yards and gardens to better support them. Cathy Wood moved to Duluth from Milwaukee in 2006. She says, to a large city lot full of buckthorn and dead grass. And she has had resources and guidance from the organization Wild Ones to tackle those problems in her yard, and her yard is now a certified NWF, National Wildlife Federation, habitat and monarch way station. So Cathy's the president of the Arrowhead chapter Wild Ones and Duluth Monarch Buddies. And she's going to talk with us about Wild Ones. And I think probably also a little bit about maybe some of what's happening in her yard. Both of them have brought a lot of materials to share that are in the back of the room. And so with that, we'll have Sarah start off here.
Okay. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Oh, my honor. Yeah, so my plan today is to give you an overview of the major groups of bees and their nesting needs. And I'll kind of wrap it up with some native plants. I decided to focus on the spring blooming plants that are of especially high value to some of our specialist bees and Lepidoptera.
Share screen here so that we're.
Oh yeah, that's fine. I can start by telling you a little bit about the Xerxes Society. How many of you are familiar with our organization? Most of you. Yeah, many of you are probably members, so thank you for that. Pat Thomas was a featured member a few years ago for all of her support. So yeah, I'm really honored to work for Xerxes. I've been with Xerxes for about 15 years, and I just decided to take an extended leave to spend a year off with my kids. So this is one of the last talks I'm giving for a while anyway. Yeah, our group has been around for about 50 years. We were founded by Robert Michael Pyle, who I know some of you probably know, as a butterfly conservation group, but we've since expanded to work on really any imperiled invertebrate, trying to focus on those that are, we have evidence that they're struggling and we know enough about to do something meaningful for. Okay, I'm gonna see it. I think the mouse is up here. Oh, okay, it's really sensitive, so bear with me. So our mission is protecting wildlife through the conservation of invertebrates and their habitats. We have about 70 staff now nationwide, doing a lot of wide variety of work. I'm with our pollinator team. Yeah.
We're fighting with our wives here.
Sorry, everyone. Yeah, this is so.
It's gonna be touchy. Maybe it will just
so
touch
touchy.
the button. Just touch the right or left and it may do it. That's what mine does.
Oh yeah, okay.
Or I can.
So mostly my focus over the past 15 years has been working with farmers in agricultural areas and trying to rewild our landscapes for biodiversity conservation. So converting really any area that we can to habitat. Sometimes we're working on field edges, sometimes we're working in the understory of orchards. And then also along with that, of course, comes protection from pesticides. And we do a lot of outreach and education and on-farm field days, and also create a lot of technical guidance documents
for people to, just kind of go forth and do their own thing with the best available science. What drives our work? Okay, so you all have probably heard about bee decline. There's really no shortage of evidence that insects are struggling, not just bees, and actually not just insects, birds, amphibians, reptiles, all of our wildlife, they're struggling. I can just read you some of these titles. So, patterns of widespread decline in North American bumblebees. Actually, a quarter of our bumblebees in North America are at risk of extinction today. That includes about 6 species here in Minnesota. There are studies that show that as we lose pollinators, we also lose the plants that depend on those pollinators for pollination and seed set. But what I would point you to, I'm sorry, some of the text is getting cut off here, but
Sorry. It should go up, but it's not going up.
okay, yeah, well, I can just say that stuff to you, but basically, one of my favorite papers, a review paper on this topic, was authored by our executive director, Scott Black, and another researcher and colleague. But the title of it is Declines in Insect Abundance and Diversity, We Know Enough to Act Now. And that's really my take home message, is kind of a guiding principle of our work at Xerxes. We don't need to research this problem to death. We really know enough to act now. What are the major drivers of decline? I can't go back, I can go forward. Sorry. Yeah, how strong is the camel's back? Okay, so the major threats to invertebrates today are habitat loss, climate change, pesticides, and invasive species. And a lot of our agricultural practices that are pretty reliant on pesticides. So thankfully, some of those areas we have small changes that we can make that will help turn that tide and hopefully prevent the extinction of some of these insect groups and species. If you want to just look at our bee diversity for a second, a lot of times when I say the word bee or tell people I'm a pollinator biologist, people get really excited about one bee. What do y'all think it is? The honeybee, of course, yes. And the issue with that is that a honeybee, first of all, is just one species. We actually have almost 500 different species that native to Minnesota. The other issue is the honeybee isn't native here, and there's been increasing evidence that it's actually problematic to a lot of our native bees in terms of disease spread and competition for limited resources. So honeybees and native bees coexisted for many, many years, hundreds of years, potentially happily, I'm not sure. But as resources became more and more limited, some of these issues with competition and disease spread have become more of a serious problem. So the thing to do if you want to save the bees is not to become a beekeeper. But it is to start planting habitat, native habitat to feed our native bees. So we'll get into that as we go on. Okay, so close to 500 different native bees in Minnesota. I tend to wrap my head around that diversity in terms of the nesting biology of these bees. About 70% of our native bees nest in the ground, and the remaining roughly 30% nest in cavities in either stems, branches, or dead wood. So they're using plant materials. So I'm going to talk you through both of those major groups, starting with the ground nesting bees. So this is the bulk of our native bees. In this group, we have both solitary and social species. Are you all familiar with those terms? Okay, mostly, yeah. So social bees are the ones that have like a queen and workers and males. Solitary bees are the ones that really just kind of live their lives alone. You have one female mother and her offspring in a nest. Okay, so the nests are dug by the female mother. The males don't do any nest creation. They can be just a few centimeters below the soil, or they can be up to 1 meter or more below the soil. Here's an example of a nest underground. Although the configuration can be really varied by species. The eggs, kind of the common theme is that these little cells are essentially little bedrooms where one individual egg is laid. So every offspring gets his or her own bedroom. And each of those bedrooms is, we use the term provisioned, but basically it's stuffed with food, it's stuffed with pollen and nectar. And then the egg is laid on top of that ball of pollen and nectar. I'll show you some pictures of that in a second.
How do they actually dig their nest?
They dig it with their mandibles and their front legs.
Wow.
Yeah. And you can see this is a female poking her head out of a nest that she's in the process of digging. And you can see all this disturbed soil. And yeah, it's really fun to watch them. They'll be underground sometimes for minutes. Down there, if I'm trying to take a picture, I have to sit there and wait. I know you're in there, you know, and eventually she'll come up. But what was another question? Just a question.
Do there are there bees that use canopies that have been created by other insects or other creatures?
Yes, definitely. That's my next group, so I'll talk about them. Good segue. Okay, so a little bit more on nest structure. Some of these bees have, here's another great example of a nest. So you've got this main shaft going down, and then it's branching out into these little bedrooms. And here you can see this is the ball of pollen and nectar with a larva feeding on it. But in some cases, and this is a bee, I mean, we think of a bee as like the adult stage flying around, but that stage is usually just a couple of weeks long. And most of the life is spent underground in this developing stage. But yeah, sometimes you have females that will have their own nest underground, but they'll share an entrance. And so one female's nest will branch out over here and the other one will branch out over here, which, can y'all see any advantages to that?
Or cooperative works.
Cooperative, yeah, especially cooperative nest guarding. So when say I'm this one over here, when I'm out gathering pollen and nectar, which takes a lot of work, my friend over here can be making sure nothing else is dipping down into the nest and laying its own eggs, because that parasitism is a major thing that happens where some other insect, a wasp or a beetle or even another bee, a lot of our bees are parasitic, will get into a nest. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going. Here's a little more on the life cycle. So this is a bee that specializes on, what is this plant? Spring beauty. Can only collect pollen from that plant for its babies. So if you don't have this plant, you don't have this bee. Here's the pollen going into the nest, and here's that developing larva. Here's the pupa. And ideally, the emergence of this adult bee the following spring is perfectly timed with the bloom of that spring beauty. So you can see how climate change and the phenological shifts that are happening can really mess things up too. A lot of people think that they've seen ground nesting bees. I used to ask for a show of hands, how many of you have seen a ground nesting bee? And almost everybody says they have. And then I realized, like, people are seeing wasps in the ground and assuming that they're bees. So I wanted to point out the difference between these two. The ground nesting bees are typically solitary, where you've got a female provisioning for her own offspring, and she will be active for, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, getting all those provisions in there, and then she'll go out to the nest, and then she leaves. So you wouldn't even see that nest. You'd walk over it all summer long. There's a very slim chance that you would even see it. In contrast, the social wasps, like our yellow jackets, paper wasps, etc., they're social. So they've got a queen in there who's laying eggs all season long, building up the colony. The workers are active all season long. There's a lot of activity, and there's a lot of resources in that one concentrated spot. So these wasps are really aggressive. They have good reason to be. All their babies are right there. But you are very unlikely to get stung by a solitary ground nesting bee, and quite likely to get stung by a wasp.
Usually the third one in line gets stung.
Yeah. That's a bit on our ground nesters. Now I'm gonna talk about the cavity nesting bees that use plant materials. These are just a few of my favorite. We have 13 different genera that use these plant materials for nesting. Ceratina, small carpenter bees, they nest in stems. The yellow-faced bees also nest in stem stubble, but they're even tinier, so they use even smaller statured plants. The mason bees, a lot of you are probably familiar with mason bees. They're a major pollinator, and they're also one that people have figured out how to, like the honeybee, how to rear, and you can buy them. They're like a commercial bee now. But we have wild native ones as well that just show up if you have the right habitat. And then leaf cutter bees, these are another favorite of mine I'll talk a little bit more about. The common theme with these bees is that they all make their nests in a linear series, either in a stem or in dead wood. And they, like I showed you with the ground nesting bees, every baby gets his or her own bedroom. So they're making cells in this linear series, and the major difference is they're the material that they use to divide those cells. So some of them will use leaf tissue, some of them will use resin that they gather from conifers. Some of them make their own silk. What else do we have going on? Mud is a really common resource that bees will use to create their homes. Okay, so a lot of the bees I just showed you use stems, and what we encourage are, if you want to try to promote not just flowering habitat, but also nesting habitat in your own yard, what we encourage is that you start to leave stem stubble, like you can see in this picture. This is actually a yard that I just walked by in Duluth, and I could tell that they knew about stem nesting bees because of the way that they were, instead of just cutting the plant material off at the ground level and discarding it or composting it, they cut it off at different heights of like 6 to 12 to maybe 18 inches. And when you do that, you're creating these nice cut ends that bees can then come in and move into. And actually, I was giving this presentation for Wild Ones. Where's Cathy? It must have been last year, and the woman whose yard that was like, "That's my yard." So, but yeah, if you cut your stems, the bees will seriously come. Which tells me this must be a limiting resource. If I can go out in my yard and create all this stubble and have almost every stem occupied, that's great. They're looking for that. Some of these bees also use the stems for overwintering. So this time of year, we could go look for these overwintering bees later tonight, and I've seen them in the gardens out here. But basically, if you can see if they're occupied because the entrance is chewed in a certain way. And then if you open them up, which I don't like to do a lot of, but if you open them up, you can often see these little bees just getting ready for spring. Sometimes they'll even come out, fly around, check things out, and then go back in if it's too cold. Some of these bees also use shrubs like raspberry canes, sumac, box elder. Elderberry is another really common one. Here are some of the plants that are commonly used, and then I don't think I'll talk through this for the sake of time, but there's a bookmark in the back that we created to just kind of help guide you through this process of when to cut your stubble and what to watch for during each of the seasons. But basically, we recommend you leave the plant intact over the winter, and then come in the spring, and rather than clearing the whole plant away, cut that stubble. So this is a good time of year to start thinking about stubble. Oh, keep going. Another resource that's just can't really be overstated how important it is dead wood. Rotting log, dead wood really at all stages of the day. So some insects will require wood that has the bark still on, because that's the very niche habitat that they're using, is the layer right between bark and wood. Others, like this bee here, strictly nest in wood that is it's so well decomposed that it's almost soil. And this is a bee that most of its relatives actually nest in soil, but it evolved this strategy of using rotting, really well decayed rotting wood. These were some creative, well, especially this one was another yard and duluth that I thought was a creative way to leave a snag and do something with it. And then the question earlier about, are some of these bees using holes left by other insects? Definitely. All of these wood-boring insects, wood-boring bees, sorry, don't dig out their own hole. They go in and use the abandoned tunnel left by some other insect. And typically that other insect is a boring beetle, like Cerambycids, the longhorn beetles, and emerald ash borer even is a boring beetle. A lot of our just forest beetles make the mother lays her eggs on wood and the larvae tunnel through wood, and then they leave the tree, and that tunnel left behind is a super important resource for bees. So boring beetles leads to interesting bees. And I talked through that already. Here's another one that uses the really well decomposed rotting logs. And another one. And, okay, and then leaf cutter bees. So this is another bee that will nest in stems, tunnels and woods, rock cavities. Also, I frequently see it nesting in the ground where they do dig out their own tunnel. But the unique thing that holds them all together is their use of leaf tissue to create those bedrooms. And they're kind of like little, I think of them like little sleeping bags, actually. They're like capsules. And the way they do this is the female, when she's in the act of provisioning a nest, she'll be gathering pollen and nectar, but she'll also be taking certain trips where she gathers leaf tissue. And she has really big mandibles that are really sharp, so she uses them kind of like a scissors and snips around to create a circle or an oval, and then she carries it back to her nest. You can see the leaf is tucked under her there, and she pulls that leaf underground. This is one that I watched in my own yard for several years in a row, that they were coming in the same spot. And so she pulls that underground, kind of positions it, and then starts taking some trips to get pollen and nectar. So she's stuffing that capsule with pollen and nectar, laying an egg on it, and closing it off. Here, I'll see if this video works. Oh, yeah. So this is a female pulling a leaf underground. If it works. And then you wait for a couple minutes, and I was really trying to figure out what type of leaf she was collecting. And I'm pretty sure it was something in the canopy. I never figured it out, but when she came out, she just shot straight up in the air. So I'm guessing basswood or maple. That's carrying it home. So I've had so much fun, especially since moving to this area, because these bees are quite common, and they're kind of more, I think of them as more forest bees. Anywhere you go for a walk, you can start to see evidence of them. And the way you can tell that it's a leaf cutter bee and not some other herbivore, all kinds of things feed on leaves, right? But you can tell it's a leaf cutter by how perfect these cuts are. So they're either a perfect little circle or a perfect oval. The ovals are used to kind of wrap around the sleeping bag, and then the perfect circles are used to cap the end, like you can see with that circle there. And they use a lot of different plants, but they also have strong preferences. So there's some plants that look like Swiss cheese every time you see them, and that would probably be, oh, I don't even have a picture. Oh yeah, I do. The native honeysuckle, that plant is just, they love that plant. They also love ash, maples, roses, Juneberry. And then there's all kinds of roses, raspberries, evening primrose, fireweed. Then there's all kinds of plants that they just won't even touch. So.
Is there a certain time of year that's happening?
All those pictures were probably early summer. I mean, that video that you saw, but we went on a camping trip it was like, we woke up and there was snow on the ground. So it must have been late October last year, and there were very fresh cuts on roses. So and I don't know if that nest survived, but yeah, they're a bee that's active all season long. And yeah, you can tell if it's a fresh cut by kind of if the edge of it is browning and eroded, or if it was, just cut. Okay, so another recommendation that we have is just and now I'm talking about insects more broadly than just leaf cutters, but leave the leaves and other plant material in the fall and spring, rather than breaking it all up and composting it or shredding it or worse. And the reason for that is because leaf tissue, again, at all stages of decay, provides really important food and shelter for all kinds of things. Butterflies, beetles, bees, bumblebee overwintering queens. I haven't talked about this yet, but the life cycle of a bumblebee is pretty interesting because they're social bees, so they build up big numbers. But come fall, everybody dies except the newly mated new queen. So the entire survival of these bumblebees is hinging on the overwintering success of these newly mated queens, and that they absolutely need leaf litter to survive. That insulative property that leaf litter has gets them through the winter. So, okay, so another strategy that we recommend is just kind of anything messy that you can leave in your yard is usually a good thing. Maybe you can use this as lazy landscaping, but brush piles, rock piles, tall grass, all dirt, bare ground. I don't know if I can picture that, but for those ground nesting bees, a really patchy yard is best. Because then that gives them access to the soil and everything that they need. We have a newish resource on this that you can, I think I might have one copy back there, but it's on the website. You could download it and look through it, but it talks you through a lot of these different resources that we know are really important for nesting. This is Nancy's yard, buddy. And now I'm gonna switch gears. Actually, I could take questions if you want to talk about nesting anymore. Otherwise, I was gonna switch gears and talk a little bit about plants and then turn it over to Cathy. Yeah.
Will the ground nesting bees be affected by ant colonies in bare ground? When you talk about value of bare ground, but sometimes it's completely ant.
Ants will move in. Yeah, I actually get that question a lot, and I think, I mean, their nests, the bee nests are open for such a short period of time that and they evolved with ants. So I imagine these mother bees have very sophisticated ways of preventing ants from getting in and finding their nest. And they do a lot, they set up their nests when they're done provisioning it, sometimes like very, very thick plug. And then they also do little tricky things with like cleaning up any scent of themselves and making like misleading ants and other predators by leaving scent deposits in other places where there isn't a nest. So I would trust that they know what's going on. I do worry about like fire ants or invasive ants that maybe they didn't evolve with and don't have those strategies, but yeah, good question. There are a lot of natural enemies out there. Yeah.
As far as deadwood laying around, is there a good time of year to burn your slash pile or a good time of year to avoid burning your?
Yeah, that's $1 million question. Not really, because there's always something at some stage of egg larva, adult emergence, whatever. But I would just say, we think about this a lot with prairie management because prairies evolved with fire and we need to burn our prairies to maintain these diverse plant communities. But when is the best time? What we recommend in that case, and I think you could scale it down to any situation, would be trying to do whatever you do in patches. So don't burn all your brush, burn half of it, say, or a third, with prairie management, we say a third, and then rotating your burns, or whatever disturbance, and then the third thing would be not doing, whatever your disturbance is, not doing it at the same time year after year after year, because then you're hitting the same insects or whatever wildlife year after year after year at what might be their most vulnerable time. But if you stagger it, you're kind of spreading the love or spreading the damage. But, okay, so I'm gonna switch gears now and talk about plants and why what we plant matters so much. Quick overview. So plants are doing a lot for insects. They're providing food in the form of pollen, nectar, other plant materials. They're providing nesting sites and resources like I just talked through, ranging from stems, branches, resin, leaf tissue, flower petals, and stem pith. They're providing shelter, both for nesting and for overwintering. They're providing a place to reproduce, to find a mate sometimes, to lay your eggs sometimes. And then they're also providing phytochemicals. So when insects are eating plants, oftentimes they're incorporating the chemistry of that plant into their own bodies, and often using that as a way to find their own mate or to avoid predation. So a really good example would be like monarch caterpillars feeding on milkweed and accumulating those toxins into their bodies, and then birds know not to eat monarchs because they're so distasteful. So insects are, there's a really, really, really long history of coevolution here, and really sophisticated things going on. So native plants are providing a lot. In terms of herbivory, so we talk about insects as either specialists or generalists. Specialists are insects that have adapted to a very limited number of plants and plant chemistries. Again, the monarch and milkweed would be a good example. Another example that I'm showing here is the fritillary. This is the regal fritillary, whose larvae only feed on violets, mostly on prairie violets. And not surprising, well, this butterfly is pretty interesting because unlike monarch mothers who lay their eggs right on the host plant that their babies need to feed on, they lay their eggs right on milkweed. The fritillary actually just flies over the prairie and drops her eggs. Just trusting that there's enough violet plant material in that prairie. Not surprisingly, this fritillary is in really steep decline. And yeah, so that's an example of kind of an extreme specialist. Generalists are insects that have the ability to consume a wide variety of plants. A lot of our bumblebees are generalists. A lot of our plant bugs are generalists, but there's within every major group, I would say there's some degree of specialization. Most of our Lepidoptera are specialists, so feeding on sometimes just one genus, sometimes a plant family. Bigger picture, looking at all insects, 90% of our plant feeding insects are specialists. So, and typically that's a native plant relationship.
I have no idea. It should disappear. I don't know why that showed up.
Here, we're just looking at Lepidoptera specialization, and this native plant finder tool is something that Doug Townley developed, and you can just go in and put your zip code in and get an output of what plants support the highest number of Lepidoptera in your zip code. So I've done this for our zip code, and willow comes out on top as having 355 different butterflies and moths that feed on willow. Cherry and plum, the prunus genus is also up there. Oaks are well known to support a lot of Lepidoptera, birch, poplar, blueberry, on and on. Okay, in the bee world, oligolectic bees are the ones that only feed their larvae pollen from a specific family or if you're related, like that spring beauty that I showed you earlier. And then we have different degrees of specialization, but the takeaway here for you is that 30% of our bees in the central US are pollen specialists. And the other takeaway for you is that these three plant families tend to host the highest number of plant specialists. So the asters, things like sunflowers, and asters, of course, the Fabaceae, the pea family, so things like purple prairie clover. And then the Salicaceae, the willows, host the very high number of specialists. So if you want to just not have to really do your homework, but make sure you're planting plants for all these insects, those would be a good places to focus. Also with the asters, I forgot to mention thistles. Our native thistles are really, really important for a number of both butterflies, moths, and bees. So I think of a high value pollinator plant as something that either provides food for a lot of different species, provides food for something that can't feed on anything or much else, or provides important nesting resources. So ways you can incorporate more of these plants in your yard, add dimension and diversity. This is another Wild Ones member yard. Somebody help me. He's a professor at UNTA. Anyway, beautiful yard with a lot of edible landscaping and native landscaping, contrasted with this. Okay, we've got turf grass, we've got hostas. Yeah, John Hester. Really not doing much to support people or wildlife. Here we're showing, this idea of reducing your lawn size by gradually increasing the size of your native plantings and using your turf grass as accents or pathways. Diversity is key, of course. Filling your bloom gaps can be kind of a good place to start. I remember when I first started learning about bee foraging needs, I had a calendar where I actually kept track of what was blooming, when the start date of something's bloom time was and the end date, and then tried to kind of look at where I had gaps. And that was actually a really useful exercise for me because a lot of times you hear talk of the spring bloom gap and the fall bloom gap. For me, at that point, I was living on a fruit farm a couple hours south of here, and for us, the bloom gap was actually like in June, like early June, because we had all the spring bloom with the fruit trees, and a lot of other native shrubs, and then kind of a lull before things like bee balm, like all your kind of heavy hitters start blooming. And then fall is not, I don't think that one's that hard to fill with the asters and the goldenrods, but you can always work on it, bringing in more diversity for sure. How am I on time? I know we got started late and 7:18, we're going to 7:30. Yeah, okay, I think I'll wrap it up because you have about 10 minutes. Yeah, so I was just gonna talk through like 5 examples of spring plants, but do you want to? No, go ahead. Okay, I'll cruise through these then. Willow is amazing. Really the first pollen and nectar source in the spring. Also has very high protein, so not all, very high protein content in the pollen. So not all pollen is created equal. That's another takeaway for you. This is just a beautiful picture of a willow specialist. This is Andrina mining bee, pulling that pollen underground on her legs. So once she gets underground, then she'll scrape it off her legs and put it into that little bedroom, but she brings it down like that. And willow is a host plant for all these different butterflies and moths. Okay, another one, Virginia waterleaf. We're at the northern edge of its range, but we're still in range for this plant, and it's got some great specialists. It's also edible for us. Wild geranium, lovely plant. Violets, of course, also edible for us, the leaves and the flowers, but a critical host plant for our fritillary butterflies. You all know fritillaries, right? They're so gorgeous, showy, and declining, really, really struggling. Here's a fritillary. The adults will nectar on all kinds of things. So this is an adult nectaring on milkweed, but the egg laying in this case is direct on the violet. So this is a female ovipositing on violet. Golden Alexanders, this is one of my favorite plants. carrot family plants, and early blooming, attracted to so many little insects. It's kind of a open access flower, so it doesn't have, you can have small mouth parts and still access the pollen nectar, so there's a lot of interesting things that will show up on it.
Excuse me,
Yeah,
it looks a lot like wild parsnip, so just.
it looks a lot like the invasive wild parsnip, and I worry about that too, that sometimes it might get targeted for removal.
I'm sure it does, including myself.
Yeah, so be careful of that, and wild parsnip is something that certainly needs to be removed, but this one is,
Wild parsnip looks like goldenrod at all.
not goldenrod, but the golden Alexanders.
Oh, yeah, sure, never mind.
Yeah, the leaves are different, so that's what you would wanna cue in on. Okay, we have lots of resources on the Xerxes website, I'm gonna skip over that and just say, all around us are tiny doors that lead to destiny. Thank you all.
I just want to say something that Xerxes is one of the best websites ever
Thank you.
for all the resources that you provide that we can download in French and share with others, the photos, the work that you do, the research. I mean, for me, it's very good.
Thank you so much. That's so sweet. Okay, Cathy, like you said, one and only Cathy Wood.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so Martha invited me to come and tell you about Wild Ones, what Wild Ones is, and what the local chapter here in Duluth does. And I'm not going to be talking all about my yard and all my yard projects. That would be on the presentation. So now, is it the button here?
You want me to dance it? It's kind of touchy, so there you go.
There we go. Okay.
I'll just-
So Wild Ones is a national nonprofit. There are chapters all over the country, and 78 chapters and growing in 32 states. And there are a great many in Wisconsin and Minnesota. Okay, next. Okay, so Wild Ones actually started in 1977, and it's funny because it started in a northern suburb of Milwaukee, and that's where I'm from. I actually grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I knew about Wild Ones because a neighbor next door had this. We had a fence between our yards, and her plants kept migrating into my yard. Know about Wild Ones then, but then my husband and I moved up here to Duluth. Of course, this is a whole nother book as far as gardening up here. But Wild Ones actually started in northern suburb of Milwaukee. And it's been going ever since. Okay, next. Okay, so Wild Ones has a mission, sound landscaping practices, diversity that Sarah was talking about through restoration, preservation, and establishment of native plant communities. We're big on native plants and natural landscaping, and then all of the things related to it. Rain gardens, pesticides, different education about plant communities. Next. Does it work?
It'll go, just a second, it's being a pain.
It's being a pain.
There you go, fingers, my fingers.
So Sarah's talked about the food webs. Plants are so important because insects consume them, but then insects provide protein for all of these other kinds of animals, reptiles, birds, mammals. So it's really important to get the right kind of plants out there for them. Next. Okay, and we talked about the biodiversity crisis right now. Birds and insect populations are decreasing, and that eventually affects all of us and our food production. Next. Okay, so this is, I don't know how familiar you are with Dr. Doug Tallamy. He's a professor at University of Delaware, and he is an honorary lifetime member or director at Wild Ones, and he's written many good books that you should find. And he has presentations online that are free, webinars that you can just go to and listen to him, and he's so fun to listen to.
Could you tell us the name of him again?
So Doug Tallamy, down there on the bottom, right, okay. So he has 4 landscaping goals that he promotes. And the first one is when you're thinking about landscaping and providing for you in your yard, if it's big or small, that you should be able to provide for a diverse community of pollinators through the whole growing season, as Sarah was saying, from spring till fall, and actually in the winter too, for overwintering. And they should provide, your yard should provide energy for local food, for the food web. And also we're talking about, especially now with the flooding and the watershed situation, native plants do help to control erosion. And also we're talking about removing the carbon from the atmosphere. And that's a big thing now, especially with the trees. Okay, so why native plants? We're really big on native plants to restore the ecosystems. And also a big thing is having to do with climate change. Okay, why don't we move ahead? Okay, there's your prairie clover right over there. Native plants are resilient, especially with the changing weather conditions. For example, I have a prairie boulevard, and we live in the Condon area. If you drive past and you see my prairie boulevard, you know that's where I live. But 2 years ago, we were in drought. If you remember 2 summers ago, people were watering. I never watered at all, and everything was blooming and lush because native plants, the prairie plants, grew there. They were supposed to be there. So native plants require minimal inputs, and as I was saying, they do help with stormwater runoff and erosion control, and they do improve water quality. So we're talking about rain gardens here too. That's a big thing nowadays. Next, okay, Wild Ones online. If you go to wildones.org online, they have right now and counting. They have 19 professional landscape designs from all over the country that you can choose from. They have plant lists that go with each one of these designs. And so if you're thinking about, oh, what do I want to do with my yard? Maybe you won't do the whole design, but you can take bits and pieces from it. And they cover different eco-regions around the country. Okay, so talking about our Arrowhead chapter, we have about, I don't know, between 60 and 70 members right now from around the region. We have a member that lives in Ely. We have a couple of members in Superior. We have members in Renshaw, all over the city. We have a native plant sale every May. It's in conjunction with the Lewis Flower Garden Society. Has their big plant sale at Leif Erikson parking lot. And so if you come, our members dig plants out of their own yard. So you know that they grow here, that you won't have any problems with them. And you have to come by 8 o'clock in the morning. It's rain or shine. By 9 o'clock, everybody's sold out. So you have to get there. People go shopping before 8 o'clock and they look over all the different temples and decide where they want to go, and they stand there and they wait for the 8 o'clock to come, and then somebody blows a horn, and then you can start selling. So you're looking for native plants. Okay, next slide. Okay, our chapter does activities during the summer. We have yard tours, we go on field trips. This is only once a month, so it's not a big commitment. We do have collect seeds, and we have a seed exchange actually here in the early fall. And that's always fun, especially those people that do winter sowing. If you know winter sowing, we put out in our monthly newsletter in the fall, I'll have directions and some PDFs about how to do winter sowing. And sometimes we'll do it actually right here as part of one of our meetings. And then you can choose whatever seeds you want and take them home and do your own winter sowing. So one of our members last winter, well, it is winter yet now, so it was like December, January, she did 60 jugs of winter sowing, and she has them sitting aside in her snow outside in a corner of her yard that will bloom. I admit, I only did 10 jugs last year, and I lost one didn't develop, but all of the others, and I had, tons of plants to gently pull apart and plant here and there to share with whatever. It's a real easy way to generate more plants rather than now under grow lights and all the rest, So it's winter sowing, and you use milk jugs.
So tell us what you do. You sow these seeds.
Okay, very quickly, you take like a plastic milk jug, it's transparent, cut the top part way off, so it's like there, poke holes in the bottom, poke holes in the top, fill with like pro mix, rather than a garden soil, part way on the bottom. And then you just scatter your seeds on the top. And sometimes, depending on the size of the seed, I might sprinkle just a little bit more of the pro mix on top, but it depends on the size of the seed. Then you put the top back up, take duct tape and duct tape it around. Oh, before you close it up, somehow a wooden stick or whatever kind of marker, you mark what's in there, stick it in the inside, close the top, duct tape it around, and I write on the outside too, permanent marker. The cap is you recycle, leave the top open, and you set it outside for the winter in your snow. It gets all covered up, it's hibernating, just as if it was seeds out, that's scattered by themselves out there, and you let it go. Well, now the snow's almost gone. So my jugs are all exposed. Now, if it rains, fine. If it snows some more, fine. Eventually, now when it finally warms up, in another month or so, then you can take the tape off, open the top, see what you got there. If it's only really tiny, you maybe want to close it back up again because it's a little greenhouse now. But when it gets really warm, by May, maybe, you open the top up and you continue to let it just grow naturally until, you want to transplant it, whatever you want to do. And then you can dig out parts, handfuls, whatever, or just take the whole thing, depending on what there is in there. Yeah, that's all there is to it. Okay.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes.
You can also do vegetable plants this way. I have a friend who's done that too, and herbs and other things. It's amazing.
A friend of mine was just saying last Saturday at the spring gardening extravaganza at the depot, that she was going to be doing peas.
Yes.
Squash. Pea pods, she was going to do winter sowing like this week and put it out there in their little greenhouse.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah. So anyway, we do seed exchanges, and we also partner with, Duluth Monarch Buddies. They're having a Monarch Festival June 3rd at the Coppertop Church. We partner with them, and there'll be native plants sold there. And also there are, planting opportunities all during the summer that our chapter gets involved in, especially, milkweed plugs that we have available. Okay, we do have monthly meetings and educational programs from September through May here in this room, actually, at Hartley. Sometimes we'll do them online depending on our speaker. I do invite you, actually next Wednesday in this room, we're having 2 presenters from Borneo natives that are coming, talking about native plants for the urban grower and native plants for changing climate. And I thought that topic sounded kind of interesting. And so all of our programs are always open to the public, free, anybody can come. So that's 6:30, 7 o'clock here next Wednesday. So we're talking about native plants. One big thing is, and Doug Tallamy really reinforces this. If everybody took half of their green lawn and converted it to habitat, natural habitat, for pollinators and other wildlife, there would be enough to support all over this country for the pollinators and wildlife that are losing their habitat to other places, the concrete and the farms and whatever. So if you want to think about that, converting more of your lawn to native gardens, you could plant a butterfly garden, you could do a rain garden, you could plant more trees or shrubs. One good program that you might be interested in, and actually I did this last year ago in the spring. Minnesota has a Lawns to Legumes program, and it's through the Board of Water and Soil Resources. You can apply for one of their matching grants. And when you're awarded it, you are saying that you're going to convert some of your lawn in your yard. You're going to convert some of your yard into a pollinator something. So you can convert it into, add more native trees and shrubs. You can add a rain garden. You could add make it a pollinator garden. And last year, I mean, I have lots of gardens already in my yard, but I was awarded a grant. It took me 2 years. I applied 2 years ago and I finally got it last year. They paid me $350. I had to submit my receipt for the plants, and I also included mulch that I bought, and you can use the receipts for whatever you happen to be doing in your yard, and you take pictures and whatever, and you have to report back. But they're accepting applications for the fall now, and otherwise you could apply next fall and winter for next spring. And they say that they're increasing the number of people that they're awarding these grants to every year. It's getting more and more. They have more money to do this. And so I know a lot of other people that have already applied over the last couple of years and have been awarded. next. Okay, so some native shrubs, let's see. The reason I chose these, I have all of these in my yard. They're not all pictures from my yard. But, red dogwood is a good native shrub to plant for pollinators and for birds because, they all bloom. This is red dogwood up there, but I have, gray dogwood, I have pagoda dogwood. Okay, they all get a nice big flower clump, and then they get berries. And nannyberry is another one that grows, that flowers in the spring and has really good berries for birds. Chokeberry, also great for pollinators and has great berries that you can actually use if you wanted to. New Jersey tea is a small shrub that blooms for pollinators, and then Juneberry or serviceberry blooms in the spring, gets great berries, sort of like blueberries, and if you can get them before the birds get them, that I've actually put those in pies, and they're really good. And I chose these native plants. I have all of these in my yard, but supposedly they bloom in April. Well, they're not going to necessarily bloom real soon. It could be all moved back about a month. And let's see, what else, what can I say about them? Not really. Yeah, there, some of them are in the wooded area, Jack in the Pulpit. Mostly in the wooded area or on the edge. It gets some sun. Spring Beauty I have where it's a little more damp. And a bellwort, they call those marybells too, if you know them. And prairie smoke grows where it's a little drier, a little sunnier. And I did want to bring up, there are plant sales right now, places locally, where you can get your native plants that they collect, like boreal natives, well, really all of them, no, farmland, maybe not. They collect their own seeds here locally. Shoreview natives, I know he gets his seeds locally, and boreal natives, somewhat. Can you go back one? Oh, yeah.
Oops, sorry.
Oops. Okay. I wanted to mention the Carlton Soil and Water Conservation District up there, that first one. Wild Ones members that have used them, have ordered their kits in the past, have said that they've been really very nice, big, healthy plants, that they really like the kits that they get, and they still are you can still order in the next few weeks from them, and then you pick up there if you go online. And the rest of these are all local here in the area, that you can be assured that they know what they're talking about, and they grow their own native plants. Okay, next. So we have on our own website, we have a lot of resources, but also what's coming up next, what our events are. And if you have questions, you can always email us. And there's, I think, only one more. Yeah, and then this is the national website that has a whole little library of links on it, and that's where you'll find the designs, the landscaping designs, and many other links to resources. And this is at the national level. And that's, I think, all I have for right now. has brochures back there, and I have two, and I also have a clipboard. If you want to be, our chapter puts out an email newsletter once a month of what we're doing, what's happening. I include other activities, local activities in the area, plus webinars, things that are coming up from other chapters. We advertise their activities too, as far as online resources. So if you're interested, you can sign up on there, and you can always unsubscribe if you don't like it later.
Thank you, Cathy. I actually get that monthly email, and there really is a lot of good information in there. And as she mentioned, particularly this time of year, there's a lot of plant sales going on, so there'll be a lot of information there about that. So I'd like to thank both of you for being here. Dealing with our technology situation. I don't know if it's,
So
pardon?
it'll be, we'll have it available.
Yes, the recording will be available. Rich will send the link out in his newsletter, and we'll get it on our website. I know that both Sarah and Cathy brought a number of materials that are at the table in the back of the room. So given that it's almost 8, rather than take more questions here, I'd say have tea, finish cookies, pick up some materials and ask them your questions. And thanks to both of you for being here tonight. The Ikes will be here again, our last actually membership meeting of the year, May 17th. We're gonna have a presentation on coaster brook trout. And I know Molly is gonna be on vacation during that time, so that will not be a virtual meeting, but then we'll have our picnic in June. So thank you all for coming, and, you know, stay and pick up materials.